Hey Jen, good morning. How are you?
Hello, Matthew. I will now call you that from now on. Thanks for my
That's
bad.
okay. I go by Matthew normally. Did I ever tell you the story why I go by Matthew?
No.
Okay, so it's really dumb. But anyways, when I was in the first grade, that tells you a lot. Uh, I they said that you could go by instead of using your full name, you could go by a derivative of your name. So you couldn't. I mean, people here go by Trey because they're the third, but I went from Matthew to Matt. So I
Yeah.
went to Matt. Well, then halfway through, we moved from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania to York, Pennsylvania, and I had to take the standardized test, and they like spell out your full name. I put Matt. They're like your full name, and I couldn't remember how to spell Matthew. I was like, huge, and like it affected me. I like started crying. So at that point, I promised myself I would always sign everything and go by the name Matthew so I'd never forget it. And
That's pretty
if I
hilarious.
sign anything, like an email or anything, it's always Matthew. It's not Matt.
Yeah.
Now, people call me Coach Matt or Matt all the time. It doesn't really matter
Yeah.
to me, obviously, because I'm older
Yeah.
by quite a few years. But it still sticks with me. So when I sign anything, it's always my signature is Matthew. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like I'm a strong-willed individual, I'd like to think, but at least in this way I am.
Well,
But
I guess I'm the same way. Like I sign things and my emails say Jennifer, but like I go by Coach Jen and Jen. And the reason I started doing that was actually the opposite of why you did, because during my time, like Jennifer was a very popular name.
oh
I
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, my graduating class, I think there was 12 or 13 Jennifers in my graduating class. Like everyone wanted to name their daughter Jennifer that year. And so and everywhere I went, there was just tons of Jennifers. So I started nobody abbreviated it for whatever reason to like Jen, Jenn. It was always like Jen or
Right.
Jenny or like, which I hated Jenny because also during that time, Forrest Gump came out.
Oh yeah.
So that was always a thing. But anyway, so now I go by Jen, Jenn, because of the fact that there's so many Jennifers. And when someone calls me Jennifer, it takes me off guard because I'm just not used to it. And when someone says Jennifer, like I automatically feel like it's my mother scolding me.
Right. No, it's interesting you said that because, and this is we'll get into everything right after this story. So, anyways, recently our producer Josh and I had to attend a funeral, right?
Yeah.
And so we sat down, and between us was this lady, and so I sat down, and I always call him Joshua. Like just I don't know why. It's just kind of like a little joke between us or whatever. So I sat
Yeah.
down and like, Joshua, how are you? And he goes, I'm fine. How are you doing? I was like, good. And then the woman looks at me, and this should be offensive, but it's not. Anyways, he goes, are you his dad? And I think it's because I think it's because I used his full name, and they're like, only a dad would use the full name.
Yep.
So Josh looked at me, he was like, oh no, no, no. And I was like, it's okay, son. Relax. So
Yeah.
now I should just call Joshua my son. Hello, son. How are you? Or I should ask him who's his daddy. But, anyways, that's another story. So, you want to talk about equipment today, right?
Yeah. So this is something that over the past 10 years, I would say, has been near and dear to my heart because when COVID happened, I went and worked for Augusta Swim Supply full time while the pools were shut down and everything. That I did a lot of their marketing and I did a lot of just suits and things like that. And so it's really interesting going from the coaching side of it. So we'll say wet side, how we use it in coaching terms, going from wet side to dry side. Number one, it was great because I knew what I was talking about and I was able to obviously give like better advice because it was coming from a coach who and a former swimmer who had done this forever. But number two, getting to see like the other side of the sales end and the marketing end of equipment and suits was so interesting to me. And we've talked about this before, but like in college, I went to a school that was very big into fashion and I did an emphasis in design with my entrepreneurship degree. So I actually wanted to design suits
Right.
and racing suits. And so it's always been something that's I've loved and been interested about, but when I was on the the pool deck the other weekend, we started talking about, because we were watching the college team swim,
Right.
and we started talking about equipment and how different clubs and different coaches get sold different equipment, and that, sometimes they work and they're great. And then there's other times where they get sold something that's new and improved and is supposed to make some big difference where, the old tried and true works just as good. You just got to put the effort behind it. So I thought this would be a really interesting topic because I've gotten asked a lot and I've seen a lot. Teams get sold different things or coaches get sold different things. And at first they're like, this is amazing. This is fantastic. And then you like ask them where they're at with it 6 months down the road and they're like, oh, we stopped using that.
Yeah. We're done with that. We have a cart full of that stuff.
Yes.
Done with it. Would
That
you
we've
like
been
to buy it from
trying to sell and get rid of that no one wants. So I thought this would be a really interesting topic because just as coaches, it's something that, we utilize a lot, obviously, on a daily basis when we're doing practices. And I just don't think there's a lot of information out there in regards to the things that you can use, the things that, you know, don't work or do work. And so I just think, going down this rabbit hole is going to be really interesting for a lot of coaches. But the one I want to start with is like the really basic thing. And this is going to make everybody listening to this laugh because I say basic. And unless you've been in this for a long time, you will realize after we're done with the first one, they're not so basic. So I want to start with kickboards.
right. Okay. Don't use them. They're useless. Absolutely cannot use them. They're not, just don't need them.
Biggest swimmer crutch as they get older ever.
Well, I'd say that, but also there was a swimmer at the college ranks, the Olivia Slomiga,
Yeah.
um, who I was talking to her coach in college at Georgia, and he had the hardest time getting her to kick on a kickboard
Yeah.
because her coach had said you need to kick without a kickboard.
Yep.
And if you can kick without a kickboard, that's going to be better for you long term. And so it took a while to understand that there is a value to kicking on a kickboard. But
Yep.
if you only kick on a kickboard,
Yep.
then it's not, you only get the one value of it. You don't get the whole spectrum of how you can utilize your legs.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that kickboards can be so ubiquitous, which means it can be used in so many different ways.
Yes.
And a lot of the equipment, I think, that you can purchase is because we can use it as a kickboard, but it's hard to use. So let's make something that makes it easier to use than like putting the kickboard between your legs. So we make
Right.
a pull buoy.
Yep.
Okay. So now we have a pull buoy and we have a kickboard. And then we can use the kickboard another way. Okay, well, let's make a paddles, instead of putting our hand on a singular hand on the kickboard and then pull through. So you can use it like paddles, but
Yep.
paddles also can be used in other ways that a kickboard cannot. You can use a pull buoy, a kickboard like a pull buoy, but the pull buoy allows you to do something a little bit different.
Yep.
So I think that this is outside of goggles, right? And a cap,
Yep.
depending on if you want to keep your hair or not and the amount of chlorine in your pool. This is the most important piece of equipment that you can purchase. And luckily, it's the cheapest.
It is. And the reason I say this is where I'm going to bring the whole complication into this. There are different sizes, there are different styles, there are different
Oh,
weights.
yes.
There are 9 billion different kickboards that you can get. And, probably my number one pet peeve that has happened over the years that I don't think I realized until they really, I mean, became available because they used to not, all the kickboards used to be one size. Like
Right.
it didn't matter. They were all the same, kickboard made the same way. Maybe you could get a different color if you were lucky, but that was about it. And I love that they've started making smaller kickboards because of the fact that when you've got a 6, 7, 8 year old that's tiny, using what we now consider a senior level or adult size kickboard, their arms have a really hard time. Number one, reaching all the way to the top of the board, but number two,
Well,
it
I
can
would say you shouldn't be reaching to the top.
that what?
You shouldn't be reaching to the top. I always
Well,
teach that you put your elbows at the bottom of the board and hold on to the sides so that
see, I'm
you can be.
opposite. With little kids, I do the top for body alignment, that I get them to align their body better. If they're on the side, then they can do this. If they're on the top, it makes them nice and aligned. So again, look, there's another like
No,
distinction.
because I having the kickboard at the bottom allows you to manipulate the board and it gives you better balance long term, and it won't take long for them to get that alignment. I think that if you're here, what you do is you might have alignment through the spine, but you're also lifting the body up. So they're learning to keep their head up. Whereas if they're here, they're more laid down into the water. And so
Mhm.
that allows for the alignment this way, the balance from head to feet a whole lot better instead of propping them up. But
Agree to disagree. Anyway, so my point is that when you have really large kickboards with tiny itty bitty kids, we always really struggled with that because a lot of those kids, the boards were the size of them.
right.
And now they're making boards that are made for your eight and unders that are smaller, that they can get more use out of. And then, of course, there's like the kickboards, like most of my kids, because we're an arena team, we use arena kickboards. And the arena kickboards, the majority of them, they actually have like two handles. And older swimmers really like them because, there's a lot of sets that I'll do where I make the kids while they're kicking with boards that they have to do 4 to 6 underwater dolphin kicks off of every wall. So they like it because whenever they flip, it makes it easier for them to push the board down and be able to do good undulations and dolphin kicks with the boards.
Gripping the side of the board, they can have that same grip without buying the special ones with their
Except that
hands.
they hit
And
their faces. But anyway, so
bam, it's the
um,
ubiquitous again.
yep, exactly. So, and then there's also the weighted kickboards. And
Yes.
I've seen a lot of teams that I personally have never really used them. I've practiced with them in college, hated them for
Right.
obvious reasons. But there's weighted kickboards too. And again, I think the weighted kickboards, I've seen some clubs that have purchased and they like barely use them because I
What's the
mean,
purpose for the weight, the for the kickboard?
I mean, okay, how it's sold is that it's supposed to create more drag and make you kick harder. But again, there's a million ways to skin a cat, right? Like you can do that with other things. And I can say, having personally used it, yes, it is a lot harder to kick. It's a whole lot harder to kick. But could you get the same thing out of using a parachute? Yes. Could you, use the same thing as taking a regular kickboard and what we call tombstone kick, where, it's vertical? Absolutely. So, it again, I feel like that's kind of one of those things that is very specific, that for a team to purchase a bunch of weighted kickboards is,
Right.
I mean, you really got to have like a focused thing that you're going to be doing once a week to make that purchase worth it. But, number two, I always say also, like, I can tell you, Speedo just came out with these boards that actually, the things that you put on Crocs, so
Right.
the little like charms that you can put on Crocs. Speedo came out with kickboards this year that you can put charms in the kickboards.
Yeah, I mean, swimmers have always like drawn on their kickboards, put their name
Right.
on their kickboards, designed their
Yeah.
kickboards, repainted their kickboards,
Yes.
all of it.
So now, like Speedo, you can get the Croc things and stick them in the, the kickboards. So I
Only to
personally
lose
do
them
not
in the
have a
filtration
swimmer yet
system.
that has one, but in my mind, when I saw that, I thought of like every 8-year-old kid with like that in front of them when you're trying to get them to concentrate and kick, and they're pulling out little.
Oh no. And then they're going to trade them. They're going to lose them in the filtration
Oh yeah.
system.
Oh
It's
yeah.
all, but
Oh,
it's revenue. I
ex-
think I think at the end of the day with the kickboards, I've actually had senior swimmers use this like the smaller kickboards.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that once you find a kickboard that you like, just stick with it. That's
Yes.
fine. The weighted kickboards is an issue that we need to get into before we go on to other equipment
Yeah.
because the only reason you should purchase more equipment outside of paddles, buoys, and kickboards because you can use them the most,
Right.
especially a weighted kickboard that has a specific use. Whereas other equipment is more user friendly in different situations.
Yeah.
The one thing that I would say is you have to have a specific need that should only be able to be fixed with that one piece of equipment.
Right.
And then you have to have a consistency and a plan for how you're going to use it. Otherwise, don't purchase it. And
Yep.
it's got to be team wide and it's got to be long term.
Right.
Otherwise, you're going to waste a lot of money because you're going to use it for 2 to 3 months, see some benefits, and say, okay, now I've got that back there. I can pull it out when I need to use it. But then remember, you're within your micro and macro cycles. You only have a certain amount of time that you can use it before you're either preseason, you use it there, then you're training hard. It's hard to put in the extra sets there sometimes. And then you're going to be tapering or getting into competition, and you're not going to be using it there
Right.
as you're tapering off. So really, if you look at the calendar year round, you're not going to use that specialty equipment, but a couple months maybe out of the year, if that's still a need for that one group that you're trying to target. And if
Yep.
not, it's gone.
Yep. Exactly.
And one
Um,
other thing, and a lot of the specialty equipment is only for like senior swimmers.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a big thing too, is that like over the years, I've personally experienced, and I know a lot of coaches have too, that like parents go and see the advertisements or they
Yes.
see it on YouTube and then they go and buy it and all of a sudden the kid shows up and they're like, I have these new like I will use this example. So gosh, this probably came out like 10 years ago.
Okay.
The goggles that show the
Oh, the
times,
splits and all that kind of stuff.
the
Yeah.
splits and stuff. And like I probably had two or three swimmers after Christmas that showed up with these goggles that were like 12, 10 years old.
Right.
And you know,
$100 goggles. Awesome.
yeah, and I mean, so as you were saying, this is kind of the same thing where like the utilization of how those are sold, you need to talk to your coaches before you go and buy things like that for
Right.
your kids. And if they're not listed on the equipment list, definitely don't buy them because those coaches every year will go and update the equipment list based upon the needs of the team and the training of the team that they know they're going to be doing. So, again, with kickboards, just like you said, I am a firm believer in the fact that like one size doesn't fit all. If you find a kickboard that's shorter, longer, has the handles, doesn't have the handles, whatever, and it works for you, get it. Like, don't force kids to all get the same exact kickboard and that's the only option that they're allowed to have. Give them options that's going to work for them. And even at the pool, have, extra ones available, but specific ones. So, again, I'll use one that I've seen happen a lot. We call them alignment boards,
Okay.
alignment kickboards. You know what I'm talking about? So, for those that don't, this thing is a triangle and it's a foam triangle and it really only fits like your two hands together. So, it's supposed to be where your hands sit in streamline and it's got like a rubber thing that goes over the middle of it for your hands to slide into. And again, the purpose of this is what, Matt? What's the alignment board for?
I'm not sure, but it sounds like alignment.
Yes. So this was created as, oh, you know what we need? We need alignment boards. And it's literally just trying to get your body in streamline in proper alignment to stay straight.
Right.
And I have watched so many teams purchase these things and they use them for about 2 to 3 months. And then it's just, as you said, it's one of those things that they're like, it's there when we need it, but we're not going to really need it. And then you
That's
see
because
like,
all their kids were fixed. All the
yes,
alignment was done. So now you don't have to worry
correct.
about it anymore, right?
Correct. And then like you see the kids, like the senior kids with these gear bags that are like huge that
Huge.
have like 90 different things in them. So, that's another example of a really specific kickboard that like, that's not going to make or break a swimmer. You're better off to get something that just the swimmer fits well and feels comfortable with, as you said, and go from there. You don't need anything fancy. So, moving on to the next one,
Sure.
which this also goes along with kickboards, is pull buoys. These have you're gonna love this entertainment because I couldn't wait to say this. So when I acquired my team, I also acquired big equipment bins,
Yes,
and at the bottom of the equipment bins was the original Pool Boys.
with the
Now,
ropes.
when I say that, when the first time I pulled one out and I was like, we're gonna use these today, the kids were like, what
Is that?
is
Yes.
that?
It was like the two foam cylinders with like the rope between them.
Yes,
You know
with
what those
the
are
rope
best for?
between
You know what those are best for, honestly? When I was at
chucking at
Rose,
people.
no, no, no. When I was at Rose Bowl, we used to have those.
Yeah,
And so we would play a game called Can the Coach Get It on the Flags?
yeah,
Because those will go over the flags. And if
yep,
I could rope it on the flags, then they had to do a super hard set. If I didn't do it, then they wouldn't. I got good enough that I was like, you guys are done. And I
yeah,
just didn't go on there because it would wrap around and stay. And you could see all the kids like, you know what I mean?
yeah,
But if I missed, like, I think I gave myself like 3 or 5 times. And then if I missed it, they would just celebrate and just like, super excited. They get out of something, whatever it
yeah.
was. That's pretty much the best use for them.
Yeah, but it's entertaining because again, it's like proof of the evolution of equipment,
Yeah.
right? That like, I mean, that was the original pull boy was the ropes with the two, foam buoys on each side, and now it's just one solid piece of foam. And they've designed them, two like Arena's got a pull kick one that you can actually use as a pull buoy and a kickboard
Right.
that they designed it so you can use it for both. So like they've morphed the two into that. Um, but same thing with pole boy. It's like my favorite is when like some master swimmer accidentally leaves a pole boy and we get it and the pole boy is like this big. And
Yes.
then there's like an 8-year-old that
Trying to
grabs
get on it. Yeah. It's like riding a horse. It's not going to work.
it like swimming like this.
Yes. This is swimming downhill. That's
Yes.
what you do. You're very buoyant at this.
But it amazes me too sometimes because they've actually pretty much genuinely stopped making pull boys that one side of the pull boy is bigger than the other.
Right.
Because again, that was the first morph when it all became one, was that one side was supposed to go down on the bottom and one side was supposed to go on top. And
The
now
kids
they've
can
just
never
stopped
figure it
doing
out
that completely.
because
It's
the kid,
all the same.
yeah, because the
And
kids can never figure out which was the big side and which was the small side because they're grabbing and going.
yes,
Right.
yes, correct. And like the first time that I had to say that to a kid, they were like, I never even knew that that was a thing. That's why one's bigger than the other. And so like, but again, it shows you that like we keep morphing things to make them simpler, and then sometimes we make them more complicated. And I feel like the pull boy has actually been one of the one things that has gotten less complicated and more streamlined of any of the basic equipment that we use because now it's just all one size. There's no like, and you can get small and medium ones, which is great because again, with little kids, if they use an adult size one, they're going to be floating. And
Right.
so I do like you can get smaller ones for smaller kids now, but they're all the same shape and there's no like big or little at the beginning of them. So, again, my recommendation is normally to my parents if, they're really, if they're under like 80 pounds, they need a small one.
Right.
And anything above that, they can use a normal size, but 80 and below, they need a smaller pull buoy for it to be efficient. So,
What
I
about
mean, what's your
straps with pull
feeling?
buoys?
What?
What about straps with pull buoys?
So, my kids love straps so much right now.
It's one of
Um,
the most underrated pieces of equipment
It
that you can use.
really is. And I love that now because it used to be that we would use TheraBands, so the therapy bands, right? That I would use therapy bands as the bands because I mean they weren't making them
Yeah,
yet.
okay, but before we go any farther, we're talking about the ankle straps that you put
Yes.
around your ankles, and you
Yes.
can, and the Thera straps are the ones you could cinch, correct? Like,
No, so the TheraStraps are the ones you use for PT.
okay, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So they were originally used for PT. And so again, this is not for everyone. That's actually where these bands started at, was that a lot of the
I will
swim
challenge that.
as
And the only
well.
reason I say that is because one of the founders of the straps, using the straps, was a coach up in Canada.
Yeah.
And one of my head coaches was his swimmer. And
Oh,
what they did and what we did at Rose Bowl at the time is we went to the local tire factory, not the
yeah,
tire factory, but like where they change your tires, and we would get the old like tire inner tubes
yeah,
that you could have, and we would cut them with
right.
like wire cutters, and so that we could make them, and then we would just hand those out because they were free.
Yeah. Well,
So
see, that was being resourceful. Most teams are not that
no,
resourceful.
they're not.
Well, and because honestly, like the reality of it is that
That's all.
so when PT started using them for dynamic and for, swimmers, all of the exercises that they started doing with them, like they were easily accessible that you could just, I mean, they even
Yes,
had like the things that were wrapped up that you could cut in the same concept that you just
right.
said that, you could order these massive things of them and just cut them, tie them, and put them around the kids' ankles. So, and then, like your friend who from Canada, like then they actually started inventing ones that were thicker and fit tighter, and now Arena, TYR, Speedo, they all, make them that you can get them. And so a lot of times, yeah, I'll use pull boys and I'll use straps, or my kids really love when we just use straps
Hated
and
that.
no pull boys.
Hated that. Yes.
So, but yeah, I mean,
Especially
that
when
goes
you do,
into,
especially when you do that without paddles. Just
oh
swim
yeah.
with the strap. And you're like,
But do you know what and coaches, you're gonna love this, you're gonna laugh when I say this, but the worst thing in the world is when like the rest of the swimmers that are really great at kicking and they're like, oh no, bands. You have that one kid that all he does is pull.
right,
All
he's
that
just gonna
there
crush it.
is no kicking involved. And he's like, yeah, let's go.
Let's roll.
Band time. Don't have to kick.
Yes, yes. Just
Like they're celebrating.
reinforces that wonderful habit of not kicking.
Yes, correct.
Awesome.
So So yeah, I mean, pool boys kind of go along with, that's another basic thing. And so we'll talk about bands more later when we get into the little specific things, but let's go into fins because this is something that's very fascinating to me of the evolution of fins. So you start and say what fins you recommend for young kids, what you recommend for your middle kids, and then, older kids, or if you just go across the board. What do you normally do?
Deep sea diving, super long fins for all people. Just you might as well just get to the other end as fast as you can. Um, no, I mean you start off with just the regular black ones that fit you. That's
Yeah.
that's where I go.
What's your fins?
They are the long fins. It depends on the kids. Usually with the little kids, just get them some fins.
Yeah,
Get fins that fit their feet, and they can be the long fins, and let them have fun with it because again, 10 and under, it's more about fun and just getting used to the equipment. And it's for them, they're just using the equipment and it's fun.
yeah,
You can explain the purpose to them, but they're not going to get it. They're
right,
not going to care. They're just going to be going zooming and they're going to be racing and they're going to be kicking and they don't realize how much it uses their legs. And so that's
right,
really what it is because if you have the longer fins, it puts more weight on their muscles and it allows them to build up their muscles. And it's fun because they're zooming. Then they came up with zoomers, which were the short fins. But the problem what they had with the short fins is that they were too heavy. I think they were way too heavy.
they were way too
Way
heavy.
too heavy. And all you got to do is once you get to the 11, 12, 13, 14 kids, is just measure off like 3 inches and cut them.
Cut them.
And then you have their same fins. And now, but the purpose there again, now you're not going to have as much weight on their feet as far as the tension from the length of the fins, but they can go faster and they can change the rate. And
Right,
it's more closely aligned with what they need to do as far as a 6 speed kick or speed kick, or if you're going full power and get a lot of water, they can't turn over the fins as much as you want. And that again, let's go back to basic physics, right? So you have the ways to build power are either put a lot of weight in low reps and move it as fast as you can, or just high repetitions. So this gives you the high repetition and more resistance, which is going to build more power, but it's only till you get later on. And so at
right.
that point, you cut them off and you say, let's go with it. If they're beginners, leave them on the regular fence because that's the only way they're going to keep up with the older kids of their age until they can get weaned off of those. But I mean, that's the basic way that I would use them.
Yeah. No, agree. And I have actually started, now with, because again, we're an arena team. Arena Pro fins are they're my go-to for senior group. Number one, I love them because they're like the old scuba fins that the backs of them are open.
Right,
So like my kids can get out and dive off of the blocks with the fins on. And
right,
like they're not tripping over things and like, and I also like how wide they are. It really helps mimic that flex in their feet. It allows, them to really feel it without giving them that advantage of a long fin.
right,
So I've really come to love those. And there's an Australian company that they were actually the ones who did it first.
right,
They're a lot more expensive, and a lot of the college teams will use them.
right,
Um, but they're the exact same design as the Arena Pro fins. And those are what I use for really all of my senior swimmers. And then, just as you said, that middle age group, we either cut the fins off or we go to like short fins. And, and then obviously our younger kids, we use the long fins with them.
right.
So my kids' favorite thing is when the senior kids, when they accidentally like can't find their fins
Oh
or like
yeah.
they left their gear bag at home. And we have this one set of fins that the boys could use that are like size 14 Speedo log fins
Oh gee.
that
I'm
somebody
surprised they stay on
left.
their. I'm surprised they stay on their feet
I
at
mean,
all.
like these things weigh like 5 pounds a piece and they are huge. And the boys are always like, oh, gotta use the log
Oh my
fins.
God. Yeah, but you can't
So
leave the lane. You got to stay
yeah,
behind everybody else.
exactly. So, but I love with the fins that we've like morphed to go along with, the Zoomers that you were saying, they also had the mermaid fins,
Right.
um, the monofin, that's what they called it, a monofin. And it
Yes.
was the same thing. Those monofins were so heavy. I
Yes.
mean, they weighed a ton. And I think like after everybody was so mesmerized by them, everyone realized that like there was becoming ankle problems and knee problems and
Right.
like numerous other things with them that they were like,
If
yeah,
they're younger swimmers, yes.
yeah,
If they were
yeah,
older swimmers, like at the college ranks, it wasn't that you wouldn't have that issue. And it
right.
allows for full body roll. So there was some advantages depending on what you're swimming.
Yeah. Yeah. But
But
I
it's
mean, I
few and far
definitely
between.
an 18 and under, like I wouldn't use a
Yeah.
college level kid that had that muscle structure, yeah, they could be fine with it. But like I just know so many clubs that were sold that and like they just rotted on a shelf.
Yes.
Like they were a fun thing that you would bring out, see how fast somebody could go with them for a 25 or whatever, and then they just kind of went away. So,
Yes.
but same thing. I think it's really important to make sure with fins, like, please, I mean, this goes to parents and swimmers, don't assume that, like, just because the fins say what your shoe size is, that they're actually going to fit you. If you can go into a shop and get measured and physically put the fins on, you're going to be much better off than just ordering them online and hoping. Or, a lot of times when parents do that and they can't return them, we tell kids to put socks on.
Yeah, I'm about to say the same thing.
Yeah, so we tell kids to put socks on to fill them in, but I mean, most coaches, we prefer not to do that. We want the fins to fit. And so, I highly recommend going into a shop if you can to actually get measured for them. Because too, I'll tell you with Arena, originally was a European company. So their sizing is different than American sizing, just like with clothes. So, we learned that, a lot of kids had to go up and down in those fins and suits because the sizing was just different because they were a European company.
Yeah,
So,
and there's sizing charts just like there is for Adidas versus Nike versus whatever it's going to be.
yeah,
That's where you need to talk to your coach. And again, the coaches need to be up to date on all this information.
yeah,
The
yeah.
way,
Because if you're selling equipment, you're telling parents to go get equipment and you don't actually know how they fit or the function of, I mean,
well,
yeah,
think
that's
of it this way. If you go to your medical doctor because you saw an ad on TV that's has a special medicine that's going to help you out long term, you expect your doctor to read up on that and be able to help you with that. And
right.
every time I talk to a medical doctor, they're like, this is one of those places where it's the job part of the job, but I got to keep up to date on what's going on so that I can advise my clients or my patients that way. It's the same thing. Is coaches, we're responsible to know what is out there,
Yep.
especially whether we're going to push it or not. And so I've had people come to me and say, "Hey, what do you think about these goggles or these things?" I'm like, "I'm not sure because I've never really considered using them before. Let me go read up on them. I'll get back to you." And
Yeah.
then I want the parent or the athlete to tell me what advantages is it going to give you, and should we be using it for the entire team?
Yeah.
And if they just say, well, it's just going to help me out, I don't know if the entire team needs it. Well, that answers the question. You probably don't need it.
Yeah.
Now, if it's something fun that you want to use for yourself, some other way, some other, fine. Whatever you want to do that way, you have my blessings to go get it. But we're not going to use it in practice. And I don't want you to push it to other people at practice.
Yeah. And, I definitely would recommend, coaches too to tag along with that go in to the swim shops and sit down and talk to the people that know these things and are getting these things and look at different bins, especially if you haven't done it in a while. I mean, there's always constantly updates happening and things happening, and you don't want to be caught off guard that a kid comes in with a pair of fins and you're like, what is that?
Right.
And or again, I've had this happen a lot that teams when we have contracts with any of the swim companies, and they're so used to just doing the normal every year what they've been doing, they miss out on like, oh, this is a great new variation of this. This is, something that could really work for the team. So again, for instance, like when they started making Arena Pro fins or, the shorter fins, that was something I watched a lot of teams like they didn't realize what was happening. And then
Right.
it was like 3 years down the road, and kids were walking in with bins that they didn't have to cut off, that
Right.
were already made that way, or there were ones with certain different weights. And, parents and kids didn't know what they were doing, and they just go in and buy these random fins. And they'd be like, the coach would go, where did this even come from? Like, I didn't even know these were being made. So, I would say at least every other year go take the time to go into whoever your supplier is and look, at the stuff that's coming out. They have lookbooks. You're able to go through and see what's about to be released,
Right.
see if there's something you want to update, because it really is worth it. And I don't think that I realized that as a coach either until I was on the other side of it. And now, every year I go into, our guy here is Dave at Augusta Swim Supply. And, I go into Dave every single year and we sit down and we go through my equipment list. And he's like, do you still want this? Do you want that? Do you want to take this off? Did you? And we look at the lookbooks and figure out, what we want to do. So I highly recommend that just because of the fact it's not that you got to get the gimmicky things, but number one, equipment is expensive and you want to make sure
Yeah.
that you're not putting stuff out there that parents are required to buy that they don't really need and you're not really using. And unless you take the time to look at those things, it can be one of those things that 5 years down the road look at and be like, why are we still buying these? Why are we telling parents to buy these? We're not using them.
Right.
So on that note, let's go into the specific things. So you start with one of your like specific equipment things that you've seen over the years that you have found either beneficial or not beneficial that you've seen, teams get or
Um,
swimmers.
so, I mean, I'm going to get into paddles real quick. And, I think it comes down to the person, as it were. And we're going to have to go a little bit more quick fire with these. But you had the paddles that if you had them one direction, they were for like long axis strokes, which would be freestyle and backstroke. If you flipped them the other way, then there would be short axis strokes, would be breaststroke and butterfly. And I found that because it allows you to, depending on where the curve was, where you could grab the water. So it's
Yeah.
going to be either on the inside or the outside, which is really good. That worked for some of my swimmers. For some of my swimmers, they couldn't feel a difference because you just
Yep.
switch hands kind of deal. I thought that was pretty clever. The other one that was like a niche that I think some coaches still use a little bit, but usually sits in the back is the non paddles. And what these were these were shaped in such a way, it's almost like a oval looking if you look at it straight, so that when you put them on, you had no grip of the water whatsoever.
Hmm.
So in a sense, it was kind of like swimming with fists,
Yeah.
so you get the motion and you can't feel the water, and so it can't help you correct different things or get a different feel. But we all know that everybody cheated whenever we swam with fist, and we would open up our palms a little bit so it looked like a fist, but you were still catching water, so you could be the front of the lane. So
Right.
this eliminated all of that, and I see that. I know the last time I saw it was at bowl school, and they were using them from time to time. But again, they're gimmicky if you use them for a short amount of time and then never use them. They're
Yeah.
not gimmicky if you pull them out every once in a while as a variation of what you're trying to remind your swimmers of. So
Right.
you don't equipment that's used a lot, kickboards, paddles, pull buoys, fins, those should be used on a weekly basis.
Yep.
The rest of it you pepper in as needed depending on where you are in your mode. But what you don't want to do is buy these non paddles, use them once. Oh, that's really cool. That really helped out. But then I don't want to go get them. I'm going to leave them in there. We can just swim with our fist. Yeah, you can get away with not doing that. But if you can afford it and you're going to use it, you're going to make it part of your program, then go ahead and get them. But those are the
Right.
two more specialized that I've seen recently. And that goes along with the forearm fins, paddles.
Paddle.
You have to lift the elbow a little bit, which were like triangular looking. Um,
Yeah.
so I think the place where the most variations occur is in paddles.
Oh, 100%. Because there's fingertip paddles too
Yep.
that are, I've seen that a lot. And again, I've seen, you know, clubs want these and then I see them used like once a year when
Right.
someone remembers that they have them.
Right.
Um, and again, I think that, you also have like paddles that are huge and paddles that are small and they're sizing of paddles for obvious reasons because of how big your hands are is how you're
Right.
supposed to size them. So that's another warning is don't just go and buy paddles what you think they should be. I especially highly recommend, before you go and buy paddles, ask a coach to grab a set of somebody's paddles of what size you should have that you can look at it on your hand so
Right.
you know what you're getting because I've had so many swimmers show up over the years of paddles they've gotten on Amazon and they're like made for like a 6'5" male.
Yeah, huge. And that's going to lead to injury too. That long
Yes,
term, that's going to hurt you.
yes, 100%. And so, you got to make sure the things are fitting the way that they're properly supposed to. But yeah, I think one of my probably biggest gimmicky things, and coaches, when you hear this, I know the thoughts going through your mind is the breaststroke fins.
Yes.
And I actually, I had never seen breaststroke fins. This is no joke until I moved south. In the Midwest, no one used breaststroke fins. It was not a thing.
Yeah,
And
but that
like,
could also be that you moved just as they were coming out.
well, it may have been, but even when they were down here, like I didn't see a lot of coaches using them.
Right.
It was more like I watched coaches use them for young kids who couldn't do breaststroke kick.
Right.
And then, and like logic of a swimmer, right? Like I remember the first time I saw them that I was like, that's doesn't seem to be good on it on knees.
Right.
Like logically watching it happen, I was like, I don't know. Did someone do research on this? Is this like, are they okay? And I maybe watched one or two kids fix their breaststroke kick, but do I think it probably could have been fixed just as easy with a little bit more time without the fins? Absolutely. And now they don't even make them anymore. You
Right.
can't you can't get them because obviously
Well, you can probably find somebody who will sell to
on
you.
the black market, yes.
The dark web. There you go.
Yes, the dark swimming web. But that was another one that I was like, and they were so weird because they had like that.
The
They were the
curl.
fins. I mean, yeah, and it was like a curl on the inside of it. They go look them up, guys, because they're really entertaining to see if you've never seen them before.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you are, the thing about it is they weren't a teaching tool. They're a
Yeah,
strengthening tool. So they're
yeah,
jacking people up. But if you had a really good breaststroke kick, it could strengthen you.
yeah,
That's true. But it's just too niche.
yeah,
It's too niche
yeah,
as far as that goes.
for sure. So my next one is snorkels. I mean,
Yes. There's 100.
we've talked about this before that like snorkels have really taken off in, I mean, I would say what, last 10 to 15 years
Yeah, I
that,
mean, the ones that come up between your eyes is the one that I prefer.
yeah,
But then we had coaches that were taping them, so it'd make it harder for you to breathe.
which Arena now makes little things you can
Yeah.
put on the top of them that restricts the breathing.
Yes, which is not dangerous at all. No,
No.
not dangerous at all. Again, what we do is we take, and this is in any sport, you take from the pros down to the college, down to the high school, it filters
Yep.
down. And now we have like coaches like, let's restrict the breathing of an 8-year-old. Well,
Yeah.
no, let's not do that.
Right.
They already
Let's
don't like
just
swimming.
teach them how to use a snorkel without drowning.
Yeah, how to like do a flip turn without swallowing the pole.
Yes.
Let's go with that one. But I
Yeah.
mean, my favorite story about that is Sebi Rualt was swimming at Georgia. Well, obviously a French national record holder, all this kind of stuff. And every Monday morning they do a hard kick set and then they do a 3,000 pull long course. And he said, I loved pulling long course. I said, really? He goes, I could just shut my eyes and go to sleep. And then he would about 30 strokes down, he'd be at the flip turn, he'd flip and then come on back. And he goes, I could just rest. It was great. I was like, never felt that before, son. I
Yeah.
always was in pain. Like it didn't matter. But I guess when you're at that level, that's totally different. Yeah. So I mean, I think as far as again alignment, I think as far as not getting, turning to the side to breathe and just being able to work on your stroke and
Yeah.
concentrate on it, snorkels are awesome, especially long course.
Yeah.
Especially long course.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that, originally when we really started using snorkels, it was kind of like gimmicky that people were like, why would you use a snorkel?
Right.
And,
That's
they're like,
because they
that's
were
for,
using snorkels for coral.
right, exactly. They were like, this is for scuba diving. Like, why are we scubaing in, swimming? And so it was kind of gimmicky, but then like, the longer it went on, everybody was like, oh, for the exact reasons that you just named, this is actually a really great tool that we could use on a, daily, weekly basis. And you can start kids out really young with it, that it helps them learn breath control, it helps them learn alignment. Like, there's so many things you can do with it. But, again, with the snorkels, there's I mean probably 5 to 6 different kinds of snorkels that
Yeah,
just how
100%.
they're shaped up top and sizes and just there's all kinds of different things. And again, it's kind of the same recommendation you get with the kickboards that you got to get one that feels comfortable to you.
Right.
Um I actually have a lot of kids, you don't deal with this on a college level or older, but 18 and under braces. It's a lot of times it's really hard for kids to use snorkels when they have braces on top and on bottom because they
Right.
can't seal their lips around it. And I've heard so many coaches like yell at kids that they're like, use it anyway. And I'm like, let me put braces on you and
Yeah.
see if you can do that. So,
Actually, let's just get you in the water and see if you can do any of this.
yes, exactly.
Yes, I
Exactly.
understand that you were there, but when you were a kid, but that's a long time ago. And they
Yeah.
didn't have these when you were
Yes.
swimming.
Yes,
I
exactly.
can't say that. I
So,
can't. I mean, we're too old now that there's enough people that were around when they first came out and
mhm.
have used them that it's there. Yeah,
But I mean, that's probably one addition that was originally gimmicky that is now like something as coaches we use on a weekly basis for
yeah.
sure across the board of all ages that I think was a really good addition that's been added to our, toolbox of training things that I really like to use. So,
Well, I hate to do this, but we're gonna have to get to our advice because we're running out of time.
yeah.
But I think that this is something that we're gonna have to come back to because we still have, according to the list that you want to
Mhm.
go over still, we still have drag socks, parachutes, cords, towers, extras, and tech suits.
Yep.
We will get to at another time. So this is just our basic list of
This
equipment.
is round one.
This is round one of many because I think this is something we could bring out. You know what we should do is just like in the future, just have you go to Augusta Aquatic
Swim
Supply,
supply.
Swim Supply, and then you can go through the list and say, guess what I found. Let's
Yeah.
talk about these, and then just quiz me and see what I think about them without knowing
Yeah.
what to bring up. It could be like really fun. But I think that there's some principles and some best practices we can give to coaches along with that. So what's one of the best practices that you would have?
Do your research, number one. Don't just listen to a salesman that walks into your pool and you think that it's really cool.
Right.
Do your research and make sure that it is something that you are actually going to use enough that will make it worth the parents' money that is going to be paying for this, or the team's money that's going to be paying for it. And then number two, like I said, at least every other year, but preferably every year, go into your supplier, go look at the equipment, mess with it, tweak it, make sure that you are giving your parents list of things that you are actually going to use so they are not spending money where they don't need to be, and
Right.
that you're getting equipment that you know you can support and you're going to use for the right purposes.
Yeah, and I think that goes along with that is it's the same way with drills. So whenever I'm talking to coaches about drills, I say, okay, that can help fix a problem, but it can create a problem.
Yep.
So there's a trade-off that you have to have. And so what you need to do is you need to look at everything that you do as a trade-off, especially if you're an economist. But what you want to look at is say, okay, so the equipment that I'm bringing in, what's the trade-off of what could it hurt my swimmers? Not physically, not, kinesiologically, but or with injury, but like what is it going to hinder?
Yep.
And so that's one side of the balance that you have. The other side of the balance is how can I use this in a variety of ways?
Right.
Right. And so, like later on, when we do the next part of this, when we talk about chords, there's a lot of different chords you can use and a lot of different ways you can use it. So, again, I've used the big term ubiquitous a lot in this a couple times. But, anyways, the more ways that you can use it, the more advantage it gives to you. And so again, with looking at why you can use it, the materials that are selling you on it only have one or two purposes. Really look at it and say, okay, so how else can I use this?
Yep.
And I think that that's why the kickboard, the pull buoy, the paddles, the snorkel, the fins are so on everybody's lists. It's on
Yep.
everybody's list. Why? Because we've learned different ways that we can use it. And then I think the final point is be experimental.
Yeah.
Look at ways that you can experiment and say, okay, I see maybe I have this problem, but instead of immediately saying what equipment can fix it, and I don't think most coaches think this way, but what equipment do I have that I could use a different way to use it? And tell your swimmers, hey, we're going to experiment for a second. I had this idea. Let's see if it works or not. I've had a bunch of ideas that I've tried that in theory, yes, that would work out really well. But like you said, kicking with a kickboard underwater, if they can't grip it,
Yep.
then it's not going to be useful for them. And so
Right.
maybe not for that age group, maybe not for that one swimmer, maybe for a different age group, maybe for a different set of swimmers, it works really well, or different equipment, it can work really well. But how are you going to use that? I think those are the considerations that you need to have as a coach.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go to swimmers real quick. What's your swimmers or thoughts on swimmers?
Learn to use the equipment the proper way. Obviously, elbows at the bottom of the kickboard, always, never at the top of the kickboard. So, just joking with you, like you're not even going to react to that. So, anyways, no, I mean, it's like ask your coach, okay, how do you want me to use this? If
Right.
you're not sure. Yes, the coaches are going to correct you at some point, but you need to know, how do I use a pull buoy? It seems pretty simple because you just put it between your legs and squeeze so that it can float your legs. I know that, but you can have pull buoys at the ankles.
Right.
You can have pull buoys up between your thighs. You can use
Yep.
pull buoys for a kickboard. So if he or she says grab your pull buoys, you've got to know how to use it for that set because it
Yep.
can be used different ways. And you've got to be willing to change the equipment that you have. And I'm specifically thinking about cutting your fence.
Right.
When your coach says it's time to cut your fence, cut them. Ask
Right.
what length do you want cut off, or what length do you want remaining, and cut them and go. And
Yep.
it's okay to
Yep.
do that. But I think that if you understand what the equipment is used for and what how it's going to help you in your swimming and in so we're going to use a kickboard and this is what I want it to do. If you're not sure, ask. Because
Right.
then once you understand what you're using it for, you'll be a lot more effective because you can feel if you're getting that benefit from the use of the kickboard in a specific way.
Hmm. Definitely. So mine is go get measured.
Yes.
Don't don't go on Amazon and buy whatever is cheapest. Don't just assume anything. Go get measured, whether you're on the pool deck and ask a coach to measure you,
Right.
whether you ask a friend to try on their fins, whatever. Don't waste your parents' money by assuming that certain things fit you or that you think that that's how they're supposed to fit. There's reasons they fit that way. It's safety reasons. It's to make sure you don't get injured. It's to
Right.
make sure it can be used correctly. So if you're getting things that are not meant for your body or are not meant for the group that you are in, that are not sized correctly, you're going to end up with injuries. You're going to end up with all kinds of things. And so just take the time on the front end to make sure that you're getting measured for everything that you're getting equipment wise so it can last for quite a while. Because you don't want to get in that situation where, again, we can go on the back end of this that you get something that's too small and your fins are too small and you can only have them for a month and then they don't fit anymore.
Or you get
So,
blistered.
yeah,
And
or you get blisters. Yeah. So just go get measured. There's shops all over the United States. You can go get measured. Or, like I said, there are always people that are on that pool deck that there's equipment that they can pull out and measure you on and tell you specifically what to get.
right.
So make sure you're doing the research on the back end.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like if you decide you want to be a runner, you go to those running stores where they have all the different styles and different ways, and they can measure you and they can look at your gait and all that. I really feel as though if you go into a shop, you're going to be a lot. I think that's great advice. I think that's
Yeah.
100%. So the parents, what would you say to the parents? What's advice do we give them?
Don't always think that the most expensive thing is the best thing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
If there is a generic fin that is the exact thing that you can get. If it's going to save you money and it works the exact same way and it's designed the exact same way, do it.
Yes.
Because equipment breaks, kids are kids, and again, there may be certain things, like I use the example of Arena Pro fins, that there may be certain things that your team is asking you to get, but just be thoughtful and be aware of the amount of money that you're spending. And if there's other options that are cheaper that you can get, do it because in the long run, I mean, they're going to be outgrowing
Yeah.
equipment, they're going to lose equipment, they're going to all kinds of things. And just like really shoes is the best comparison I would use that we know as parents. Once they get to a certain age, their feet are done growing. And then you know that shoes can last a little bit longer, that they're not going to be growing out of them. So, when they get 15 years and older, most of the time, except for boys, their feet don't grow that much. So investing in a good pair of fins, that's a good thing. But don't be gimmicked into spending a ton of money on equipment that your kids are going to, grow out of. And if you are financially strapped and, a team is saying you have to get all Speedo, you have to get all Arena, you have to get
Right.
all TYR, just send an email to the coach and say, hey, is there a cheaper alternative that we can get that would work for my swimmer? They're just starting out, that it would fit the equipment list or, whatever. And most coaches are not going to tell you no. So,
Correct me if I'm wrong, since you're an arena team.
yeah.
Whenever I've had those teams, there was a percentage of
Mhm.
the athletes that needed to be using their equipment, but not 100%.
Correct. That is very much true. So, again, I can tell you my younger kids are in, we call them Augusta swim supply fins, but they're just generic long fins.
Right.
So, they use that. All of our suits are Arena, all of our team suits are Arena, all of our, you know, kickboards that are like our spare kickboards are Arena. All of my senior kids, they all
Yeah,
have
100%.
Arena fins, Arena boards, like all of the stuff is Arena. Um, But, you know, when they're younger and they're growing so much, just ask the coaches and get the things that are on the list and see if there's a cheaper version that you can get and work with the dealer that's there. They normally will recommend stuff to you. But number two, battle your kids to get measured because 90% of the time they're like, I don't need to get measured. I know what it is.
Right.
And
I've
as a
seen them.
parent, you're going to blow up because they're going to go to practice and put those fins on one time. And by the way, if normally fins and numerous other things of equipment, if they touch chlorine, they can't be returned.
Right.
So just be thoughtful, fight the battle at the beginning, make them go get measured, make sure that they're getting exactly what they need. So then you're not, having to spend extra money or extra time on the back end of stuff. That'll really help you out.
Yeah. No, I think the other thing that I think it goes along with the cheaper versus the more expensive. Most people don't understand the way that equipment is manufactured.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but if I put it in cars or chainsaws, it makes sense. So the way that what ends up happening, and this is, I'll use the tennis ball example. Whenever I was growing up, our tennis coach always said, just get the cheapest balls you can because they're all made at the same manufacturing plants. They just put
Yeah.
different names on them so they can charge different rates because the middleman, the ones that like Penn versus Wilson, they get to sell theirs at whatever rate they want, but they're
Yep.
basically the same balls because they're
Right.
made at the same place.
Yep.
There might be a slight variation if it's a really high end, but the Wilson high end and the Penn high ends were the same, just like
Yeah.
their low end balls were the same.
Yep.
They're the same. So you will find that like certain like Michael Phelps goggles are manufactured a certain way. They're going to be a little bit separate, but most of them, if they don't have a huge tagline, are going to be the same.
Yep.
And it's the same thing with like obviously with a Hurricane. I know a lot more about chainsaws. Still St. Charles chainsaws are the best, but
Yep.
there's a version that's blue and white that's made at the same factories, just called something different. And I know of firefighters at other places in Florida that use the blue and white because they're about a third of the cost of steel. And you can still use the same steel parts because they're exactly the same. Just like
Yep.
cars, they get the engines manufactured at the same place, and then different makers use the same engines to save
Yep.
on. So
Correct.
this car and this car, they look the same. They're the same. They're just
Yep.
different. So the same thing happens with swim equipment. Buy the cheaper ones. They're probably made at the same place as the more expensive ones, unless they're hugely different. It's the same thing.
Yep.
So don't get caught up with the price tag. Don't get caught up with the brand name. Get caught up with what is going to fit and what is the coach telling me to do, and just go with the cheaper version. Because at the end of the day, your kids are only going to swim for so long. So if
Yep.
it's really great or like 10, maybe 15 years, but then in college, they're going to get their own equipment. So you're
Yep.
really just fitting them out. And you want to use quality stuff that, especially if multiple kids, can just be handed down.
Correct.
And then the other thing I would say to the parents, especially the ones that are strapped, because it's an expensive sport. If your coach gives you a pair to use, give it back when you're done using it, or hand
Yep.
it down to somebody else. If like I've had teams where they have like a bin, you can just go grab them. And what
Yep.
you do is you put yours in and you grab the next pair. It's kind of like those books
Correct.
in the neighborhoods. You exchange the books. That's
Yep.
what you want to do. So make sure you can hand it down as well. But I think
Yep.
that yeah, that's great advice, especially the sizing. Unbelievable.
Mhm. Yep.
All right. So the next time we do an equipment one, we definitely have to go over the multiple variations of goggles. And then we
Yes.
get into all the resistance stuff that we have, which goggles could just be their own. It could be
Yes.
its own episode. But I think this is something we need to continue to do every so often. And this will be basic equipment part one, and we'll move on with it from there. So thanks for the discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. I'll talk to you later. Whatever platform you're listening to, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. And if you loved us, leave a review. Also, if you're interested in getting more information from this episode, click the link in the description and we'll send you notes from this episode. Finally, do you have a topic to suggest or want to share your thoughts? Email us at swimedinfo@gmail.com. swimedinfo@gmail.com.
Join us next time for a thoughtful discussion about swimming and how coaches, athletes, and parents can improve their performances. Thanks for listening to SWIMT, Education for Coaches, Athletes, and Parents.